Okay, as explained, the book is actually called In the Beginning, and it chronicles Burnie and Anthony's life growing up as youngsters in the 70s through to the 80s in East London, and it sure sounds like they had adventures. The song I'm going to read for you this morning is called The Beating Song, and I think we can all relate to it in some shape or another. Okay. Back in the day, black communities were tight and close-knit. You could get scolded by any adult that knew you or your parents. Most of our close mates lived within shouting distance and were in and out of each other's yards, even though we were told not to go, and definitely not to eat in people's house. With that in mind, one could safely say there was not too much privacy, especially with many families living in one house. There was one phone in the house, so it wasn't hard to be up in people's business. Likewise, if you were getting beaten, the Pitney Network, PN, would recognize the weeping, wailing, and cow-bawling. This is one of our highlights in the PN. We all knew what it felt like to get beaten in front of our mates, and if you listen carefully, you could hear the rhythm of the beating song. Why, Daddy? Whoa, Daddy? Why, Daddy? No, Daddy? This, in turn, got mimicked by your mates, whether outside the house or outside the room door. It was about that time when new shoes were needed. We all knew and prepared for it by speeding up the deterioration process. This involved breaking down the shoes counter, kicking out the shoes mount. That more or less took care of the whole shoe. Then the day would come when one of your parents would say something like, "How your foot tan, sir? Me can't make people see you Palm Road with your foot tan, sir. Furthermore, you can't go to school with your foot still, sir." With that being said, the next thing was subtly to convince my dad that both my brother and I would benefit greatly if we were both wearing or judging Wayfinder shoes. The Wayfinder shoe carried the footprints of 10 British animals in their moulded rubber soles. Each pair of shoes had a secret compass inserted in a special heel compartment in the right foot. This was one of my many missions. However, I just couldn't persuade Dad to buy us both a pair, so it was me, one, that got lucky. Saturday morning, and we've been to purchase the new shoes. Not enough sweetness, sir. I'd got my Wayfinders. It was about 11:30, and Dad had to go to our store to work. Before he left, he said, "I want you to wash the dishes, cook the dog food, feed the dogs, sweep the front and backyard, and wash the car." "Yes, Daddy," we answered. Just before these instructions, I'd glimpsed the PN, that's the Pitney Network, going into the park with a football. I wasn't much into football, but I had a plan. "Make sure when I come in tonight, they play a spick and span." And with that, he jumped into the van and drove off in the direction of Clapton Pond. "Right, we're going to the park," I told my brother. "Why?" he asked. "Because everybody's over there playing football. We can do the housework later. We got all day." Now, my brother accompanied me mostly everywhere, and I never had a problem with that, but today he said no. He's 3 years my junior, so that made me the boss. I'm wearing my Wayfinders, and we're going to the park. Now, usually we made good decisions, but this wasn't one, and was based on the likelihood of me getting caught and then getting beaten or not. The possibility was slim to none at the time, so off we went. We got to the park, and within 5 minutes I found a reason to check my coordinates and everybody else's with my hidden compass. By this time, my core group knew that I was bussing Wayfinders. What they didn't understand was why my dad was sitting in his van at the side of the park looking at me. One of my mates said with a smirk on his face, "B, isn't that your dad over there in the green van?" "What green van?" I replied as I reluctantly turned around. They all stopped playing football because this was far more interesting. I could see that my dad was beckoning me to come over, and then I heard him, "Boy, find yourself over here now." The PM wasn't far behind because they couldn't afford to miss any of this. What you doing in the park? We never give you work for go our yard, fido. So what I say is not important anymore? The questions rained like licks. Then all of a sudden, the bomb dropped. What's weird? What that dip on your foot? Are the new shoes me just buy here this morning? Well, you could have heard a pin dropped. Busted. And there was no way of getting out of this. The picnic network was silent, trying to work out where the beating was going to take place. In the park or at the yard? It was clear to see that judgment and sentence had been passed. The van started up, and I heard my dad say, "Don't make her reach yard before you." Now, it was possibly 600 meters to my yard, and I was physically challenged, overweight and fat. The beating was inevitable. By the time I got there, the picnic network had taken route opposite my yard, and they were in skanking mode, ready to let off the beating song, which was actually worse than the beating itself. And we all know how that beating song goes, don't we? As written by Burnie Brightly. Thank you.